Well, 7:02. That seems all right. I'm sure a few more people will join in maybe in my little introduction, so that'll be all good. Well, for those of you who are here, welcome to the Mohonk Preserves webinar on a century of natural history observations. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's going to be a really great presentation. We have two presenters this evening, as you can see here. My name is Lauren Bohr, and I am the Education Outreach Coordinator here at Mohonk Preserve, and I'm going to be monitoring this presentation and facilitating and doing all that. I'll check the chat. If you do have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to use the chat feature. And you'll see that there's a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And feel free to ask any questions there. We'll have time at the end of the presentation for sure to answer any questions, and possibly throughout as well. And I can jump in with any questions that might be there. This presentation is recording, so you will have a chance to view this later, and it will be posted up on our website and on our YouTube channel, and some of the conversation will also be able to be shared as well, so some of the questions and things. So please be mindful and respectful during our presentation in the chat box, of course. So this evening, as I mentioned, the title of our presentation is A Century of Natural History Observations. And we have two presenters. We have Natalie Feldstein, hi, and we have Jordan Williams. So two of these presenters, I'll tell you a little bit about them. Natalie is our Research Collection and Citizen Science Coordinator in the Conservation Science Department. She has a background in plant biology, and Natalie maintains and curates Daniel Smiley Research Center Natural History Collections, manages the digitization projects, and oversees our various citizen science programs. We have quite a few citizen science programs that happen here at the preserve, so she's kept busy. Jordan is our digitization technician with the Conservation Science Department. She's a recent graduate from Florida State University's biology program. She's now working to digitize the Daniel Smiley Research Center's natural history collections. So she just came on board last year in 2020, and the focus was on the index card collection. And this year she's going to be primarily digitizing the herbarium collection. So there's a lot of work to be done. So even in just the year's time that she's been with us, she's been doing a lot of work. So as you may or may not know, April is Global Citizen Science Month. So we are having a nice focus on citizen science, and these two do a lot of work in that department. So this presentation will highlight not only Mohonk Preserve's long history of collecting phenology data, but also some of the citizen science projects that you can participate in with the preserve. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie and Jordan for our presentation on a century of natural history observation.
Alrighty, thank you, Lauren, and thank you to all of our participants. Thanks for stepping inside after what has been the start of a lovely spring week. And we're looking forward to sharing a lot more about what we've been doing behind the scenes at the Daniel Smiley Research Center. So to start off, I wanted to give you all just an overview of what we would be discussing tonight. So we'll start off with the history of both the preserve and the Daniel Smiley Research Center and how that all came to fruition. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about our archives and with a focus on our natural history collections. And then we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of what is digitization, what are digital data and why they're important. And then we'll finish up with the current projects that we're involved with and how you can also get involved and help us out. So to start off, Jordan and I are here from the Conservation Science Department, one of Mohonk Preserve's 4 programmatic areas. And as Lauren graciously introduced us, I am Natalie Feldstein, the Research Collection and Citizen Science Coordinator. She did a good job of going over all of the various things that I do. On top of that, I also help out Jordan with what she needs to get done, and Julia Solomon, who is our Director of Conservation Programs. Julia was formerly the Director of Land Protection, and she stepped up this past year to oversee the Conservation Science Department as well. So we're very happy to have her on board. Jordan, I'll let you jump in for a moment here.
Yes, so I'm Jordan Williams, and again, Lauren did a great job of summarizing what I do as the preserve digitization technician working on our collections. And I also on our team is Megan Napoli, a research ecologist. She has a hand in everything. She's very busy. So just to like name a few, she works on our vernal pool monitoring, breeding bird census. She also does our deer management program, and she does a lot of our phenology observations as well. She's very busy. Back to you, Natalie.
So that's who comprises the conservation science team today. I'm going to start talking a little bit more about who really formalized the program and what we do in the past. And I would be remiss to continue on without also thanking our numerous volunteers and seasonal technicians and interns who help us out every year, every day. So it's not just the four of us. There are a lot more people who help us get the job done. So to really start off, I wanted to highlight some of the origins of Mohonk Preserve because it really forms the basis for what we do now. Mohonk Preserve wasn't really formalized until 1978. Prior to that, it was the Mohonk Trust in 1963. But going back a lot further, almost 100 years earlier, Albert and Alfred Smiley really established their position on the ridge by purchasing what was the Stokes Tavern and turning it into what is now the Mohonk Mountain House, along with a similar resort on Minnewaska lands. So the Smiley family has been a really important component of life on the ridge for a very, very long time, well over 100 years. And who we're really going to focus on throughout this presentation is Daniel Smiley. He was an avid naturalist and what we love to refer to as one of our original citizen scientists. And as you can imagine, that is who our Daniel Smiley Research Center is named after. That research center was formalized in 1980 out of Dan's home. He spent nearly 60 years collecting data and writing reports about all of his observations on the ridge, and he really formed a really strong foundation for the work that we continue to do today. He was born in 1907 and passed away in 1989, and throughout his time on the ridge, he contributed so much to what we know about the natural history of the surrounding area. So he began data collection during his school years. He was a young boy up on the mountain, and they had the Mohonk Boys School there. And he was really interested, along with his other classmates, in what was happening on the land. So one of his teachers tasked them with recording first bloom dates and first bird arrival dates when birds were migrating in the spring. And it started there, but it really continued for the rest of his life. He continued to record those observations throughout the duration of his life, and we still continue that to this day. In 1937, he became the primary observer at the Mohonk Lake Cooperative Weather Station, which is a component of the National Weather Service. And that's a job he will continue to do for the next 50 years. And alongside Dan, you might also know Paul Huth, who is our Director Emeritus of the Conservation Science Department. And they were both really avid recorders of natural history data throughout the years that they worked and started the Mohonk Preserve. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about those various components. So within the Conservation Science Department at the Daniel Smiley Research Center, we have a few primary areas of focus. One of those being ecological change, so how things have changed on the ridge, how species interact with the natural landscape, how human use and history has impacted those ecological changes. We have a pretty strong natural history collection of various types, and we also maintain long-term environmental data sets, all based on the ridge. In this picture here, you can see Paul Huth going over some natural history observations with some volunteers in our archives. And those archives are exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So within our vast array of long-term data sets, you can see a number of the different types of data that we continue to focus on here. Forest ecology and land use data have been collected since the 1800s. As I mentioned, the National Weather Service has established a Mohonk Lake Cooperative Weather Station in the same place on top of the ridge at Mohonk Lake since 1896. We just finished up our 125th year of data collection, so wonderful record to keep going on. On top of that, we also have phenology records of over 250 species, and those are those first arrival dates and first bloom dates that I mentioned that started back around 1930. Peregrine falcon ecology has also been recorded since the 1930s, forest ecology and recreation since the 1940s. There has been an annual Christmas bird count since 1950. We also have an extensive record of vernal pool monitoring dating back to 1965 and is one of the most contiguous records of vernal pool data that's known as far as we know. The breeding bird census takes place every spring, and that's been going on since 1974. And then you'll see here a few things from 1977. Dan got really interested in the impacts of acid rain on the ridge. So he started monitoring the natural springs, the sky lakes, and also precipitation events in 1977. So lots and lots of data on a variety of different topics, and all of it is really essential to understanding what is going on in our region. So more specifically, within our long-term data sets, we have a really unique collection of natural history specimens and observation records. So specimens really refer to physical specimens that have collection data attached to them. These might be plants, insects, birds, mammals, mosses, lichen, etc. But then we also have observation records, and those are very extensive as well. And you can see an example of what those look like in those index cards and those drawers that we have pictured here on the right. And you can see just the vast numbers of records that we have between those two data sets are just immense. So we have over 70,000 bird records, over 20,000 plant records, over 9,000 mammal records, and so on. And there's so much to be gained from that data set alone. So to just kind of highlight what the power is from these long-term data sets, I wanted to go over a couple of examples of what we can do with all of these data. So as I mentioned, our weather data goes back to the 1890s. It's a very extensive data set, and that combined with all of those other types of long-term data sets can hold a lot of power. So the value in our weather data set as it stands is because the data has been collected in the same place for over 100 years. That's not very typical. Dan and his other family members, and then followed by Paul Huth and conservation science staff, and then followed by our climate tracker volunteers, have all been recording daily weather data in the same position on top of the ridge for a very, very long time, which lends to a very robust data set. And we can see with these data how climate change is really impacting our life here on the ridge. So just from 1896 to 2017, we are seeing that trend upwards in mean daily temperatures like you've been hearing about all throughout the news. Likewise, we've been seeing rainier years also in that graph to the right. And we're very lucky to be able to expand on those manual data collection methods now with automated systems that we also have established at the Dan Smiley Research Center. You can see that in the middlemost image. And that allows us to really expand upon the manual weather data. We get some other parameters involved, and we also get more fine-scale data. So whereas our manual weather data is typically collected, is always collected daily, our automated weather data allows us to look at also hourly data for various different parameters, so like temperature and precipitation. We also get information on solar radiation and soil temperature. So altogether, it hosts this really powerful weather data set. Another example of the types of data that can be found within the archives of the Dan Smiley Research Center are phenology data. So phenology is really important, especially at this time of the year, and it refers to the study of the timing of recurring seasonal stages in plant and animal life cycles. So using these images on the right of flowering dogwood, these are examples of what phenophases, or what those specific stages are of a particular plant's phenology. So you can see on April 3rd in 2017, we have a really closed up bud system. On April 18th, you can start to see those individual buds a little bit more, and then you see the progression of flower development. And all of those are very particular phases. They're very particular seasonal stages. And with Dan having started to collect data like this in the 1930s, we have enormous data sets for well over 150 plant species that's almost unknown throughout the world. So it's a really invaluable source of phenology data that's been collected consistently and over a very long period of time, often at similar locations. And combined with data, like our weather data, it allows us to study local, regional, and national ecological changes over time. An example of what that might look like be seen here. So right about now, we're in the early spring, and we're getting to the point in our season when we're starting to observe what are called spring ephemerals. So spring ephemerals are plant species that bloom very early in the spring before the tree canopy fills out and shades everything out. So they're taking advantage of all that light that comes in the very early spring. And you might recognize this particular plant species. This is a red trillium. And you'll be able to see this throughout the preserve and other deciduous forests within the next several weeks. And what we learned from our data is that we're starting to see earlier bloom times of this particular plant. And looking at the graphs on the left, you can see that as the first bloom date is getting sooner, it's also correlating with rising spring temperatures. So above is the mean spring minimum, so our coldest temperatures typically at night. And then on the graph below, we have our mean spring maximum, so our really warm afternoons. And as both of those daily temperatures are increasing, we're starting to see this particular plant species bloom about a week earlier. And that's really important for a variety of reasons. There's cascading effects throughout the ecosystem depending on what the pollinators are and how that impacts life on the ridge. So just to give you an example of what sorts of data we have at the research center, this is one. And with the combination of weather data, we can have a really powerful story to tell. But that's not all. So that's the data that we have in hand. But it's really important for us to get our data into a digital format. So it's wonderful to have all of these data on index cards and in specimens and in research notebooks and in all of our files. But it's really important to get those data out into the world. So digital data is really essential for providing access for researchers, access for educators, access for students, access for general members of the public who just want to learn. And by converting our data, our information from an analog version to a digital version, it really allows us to contribute to these local, regional, national, and global initiatives. It allows our data to be increasingly used. It's more relevant when it's actually being used, but also very importantly, it provides for data protection. And I have to bring up this frankly a terrible story because it really strongly informs why it's so important for us to preserve our data in a digital format. So in 2018, unfortunately, Brazil's National Museum experienced a major fire, and so many different specimens were lost. Like it says here in this headline, 200 years of work had been destroyed in a preventable tragedy. So just to give you a little bit of a summary before you're welcome to Google this story on your own. Brazil's National Museum experienced a fire. Digitization efforts had been on the docket for some time, but due to budget restraints, they weren't able to proceed. And then a fire happened and so much information was lost. So a really terrible story, unfortunately, but it really drives home the message that digitization is vastly important for preserving information moving forward. And we're really seeing that importance become more widely known. So in 2011, the National Science Foundation launched the Advancing Digitization of Biodiversity Collections initiative, acronym ADBC. I really wish it was ABCD, but that is just how it goes. And through that, there was a national push to provide opportunities and resources for museums and universities and nonprofits and other various stakeholders to digitize as much of their biodiversity collection information as possible. And this new technology is also really important because it allows for new questions to be asked, or it also provides an opportunity to access new answers to old questions. And a lot of this can come down to the power of images. A lot of information and a lot of software is tied to new image technology. Pictures of specimens can be analyzed for various different questions. And really, it's truly where the science is happening. So science is, of course, happening on the ground, doing field work, doing lab work, but also there's so much that can be done. There's so much potential from these digital data. Just having billions and billions of, for example, herbarium specimen data alone really lends a robust power to any sort of research that someone might be doing or any sort of teaching mechanisms that they might be using. So that's why we're really trying to focus on that moving forward. We want to get all of these wonderful data that are housed at the Dan Smiley Research Center out into the world so people can use them. We don't want to just sit on them like they're hidden little treasures. We want people to use them. You know, like I mentioned in the very beginning, we're a relatively small team. Of course, we have the power of volunteers and seasonal staff and interns to help us out. But really, we want to get these data out into the world so that researchers across the globe can use them and make the most out of them. There's so much potential there, and we just want to get them out there. So our really big push over these past few years has to bring what we like to refer to as our dark data to light. So we call them dark data because we know that they're there, but they're kind of just, they're tucked away in cabinets, they're tucked away in folders. No one's actively using them to their full potential, and it's really important for us to get them out there, like I had said. So we've recently been digitizing a variety of different data sets through online open access meaning free data portals, one of which being the Environmental Data Initiative, where we've published a few data sets since 2018. We've recently also been publishing data sets to the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And this really allows us to get our information out there because, like I mentioned, our collections are useless if no one can use them. If they're just hiding away, what's the purpose? So our collection is a priceless resource, but we realize that it's difficult to access. We're up on top of the ridge. Our collections are only accessible by appointment only. And it's really only useful if you know what's in there. So by providing our data sets through these online and open access portals, we get them out into the world so people don't have to track us down to try and find them. And thankfully, thanks to some support from the Institute for Museum and Library Services, we've really been able to focus a lot of our attention on these digitization efforts, really starting toward the tail end of 2019. And we've been working really hard on it through 2020 and continuing into 2021. So we're happy to share with you what we've been working on here today. So our current projects with support of that IMLS grant are to, first, we want to digitize our herbarium specimen collection. We have over 3,000 specimens, which, you know, to us is a lot. To places like the New York Botanical Garden, for example, are fairly small. They have a few million, I think, at last count. But the benefit of having only 3,000 specimens is that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So being able to digitize the whole collection within the span of a few years is a really attainable goal. And the value in this particular collection is that it's very strongly place-based. So often at larger herbaria, you might have a rotating cast of researchers who are traveling all over the world collecting in various different countries. The difference with our collection is that it's very strongly tied to Mohonk, to the Shawangunk Ridge, and to Ulster County and New York in general. So it's a very strong place-based collection. And there's also a lot of value in small herbaria like the one that we have at the Dan Smiley Research Center. So often with small herbaria, you don't have many duplicates. What that means is we have one copy of a particular specimen. When you go to larger institutions, there's often multiple copies. So you might keep a copy for your home institution. You might share it with your colleague. But our collections are very unique. There's only one typically collected, say, for example, of this cattail specimen. It's strongly tied to our location. And it provides an opportunity for all of these small herbaria to contribute to larger data sets like those housed in the Consortium of Northeastern Herbaria, which operates out of the Mobilizing New England Vascular Plant Specimen Data to Track Environmental Changes. It's a very, very long name. In short, it is a national science foundation to digitize New England vascular plant specimens. And you might be asking yourself, well, New York isn't quite New England. By this definition, we do fall into that geographic category. So we're going to be contributing to a portal that contains data from, like I mentioned, the Botanical Garden, from all of the regional universities and their herbaria. So we're going to be contributing information to a platform that has a whole host of really important players. So we're really excited about that. But we're going to spend a lot more of our time today talking about our natural history index card collection. So you can see Paul Huth here sifting through the card files. We have over 14,000 index cards. The challenge with that, paper doesn't last forever. So all of these natural history observations, we have 14,000 cards. We don't actually know how many observations because some of the cards have a bunch of observations on the front, some of them continue on the back. And the instance of this business card in the bottom right, there might be one observation, but the caveat with all of these is that they're recorded on index cards. They're recorded on old Mohonk Mountain House menus and other repurposed papers because Dan was an avid recycler. He didn't want anything to go to waste, which was wonderful, but these particular papers weren't designed to withstand the test of time. They're not archival. They are prone to falling apart. So with each year that passes, we run a risk of damaging these cards and these cards disintegrating and that information being lost. So our real goal for this project is to keep this collection alive for as long as possible so that future generations can access the information that Dan and Paul and so many other people spent so much of their time contributing. So with that, there have been a number of steps we've needed to take, and I'm going to let Jordan tell you a little bit about what she's been working on.
Right, yeah, so this is where I come in. So I was brought in as the digitization technician at the beginning of last year to kind of help with our index card collection and the plants. So like we mentioned, we wanted to make sure that the cards were preserved and accessible to everybody. And it's a very involved process to move them from the cabinets they're stored into online. So the first step was we had to scan every individual card. So we would have an image file like you see here on the slide. We have 2 image examples of our index cards. And so up until the pandemic hit and offices started closing, we actually had volunteers coming in very regularly. Like every week somebody was in here down in the archives scanning a card, and they did phenomenal work. I think between them, they ended up scanning about 6,000 to 9,000, somewhere in there amount of cards. So we cannot thank them enough. But then once the offices closed, I took over and I scanned the remainders of the cards. But you can't just have the image of the card because, as you can see, there is a lot of information packed in there in that small little card, and we can't just have it on image record. We also need to have a written record of all the observations contained in them. So the question is, how do we go through it? Do we have to individually type up every single card ourselves? Well, again, we turn to volunteers for that. So this is where the platform Zuniverse comes in. This is a great platform that basically helps bring together research institutions like Mohonk Preserve, like ourselves, that need their collections digitized or moved online, and it unites them with volunteers who want to get involved in citizen science by basically presenting them with hundreds of projects from all kinds of institutions. So I think on there right now you can find a project where you can look at pictures from telescopes and identify the galaxies that might be featured in the images, which is really cool. And there also are things like identifying animals that come across cams out in the forest, which is awesome. And then there's stuff like what we're doing, where we're trying to digitize or transcribe the labels of like herbarium specimens, or in our case, the index cards. And all the projects on the platform are designed to be simple and user-friendly. So basically anybody of any age range can do it, whether you're like a high school student, college student, or just an adult looking to get involved in some way. They have tutorials built into the projects. It's a very simple interface. So anyone can do a project, whether you have little experience with science or you're like an expert, like retired scientist. It's accessible for everybody. And then under the Zuniverse umbrella is the Notes from Nature platform. So that's basically an initiative specifically designed to help transcribe museum records, which is kind of what our project falls under, because we have the big index card collection and our herbarium collection, which would be museum level, and that's where our project is technically featured. And then back to Natalie for this slide.
So a lot of digitization, especially with specimen collections and our index card collection, can be really facilitated well through a program called iDigBio. iDigBio stands for Integrated Digitized Bio Collections. Now, this is a national resource for digitized information about natural history collections. So it's a place where museums or research centers like that of the Daniel Smiley Research Center can go to get all of this sort of information. It provides a mechanism for fostering partnerships and innovation, so sharing technology information, pairing up institutions with other institutions that might be working on similar projects. They also establish the digitization best practices and standards, so we don't have to start from scratch. We can go and look through iDigBio's resources. It also promotes integration and interconnectivity among the data. What that means is because data can vary from organization to organization or from project to project, it allows for those data to really work well together and for things to be standardized. And it also allows for the promotion of these collections data by the scientific community and various stakeholders. These stakeholders might include non-government organizations, education facilities, and similar things of that nature. So it's really kind of a one-stop shop for any and all questions about digitizing collections that have anything to do with biodiversity. And then within that also falls iDigBio. So you'll find as we're kind of talking, there's lots of overarching project themes followed with some things that fall within those various umbrellas like Jordan mentioned. And she's going to tell you a little bit about iDigBio and what that is.
Right. So iDigBio holds a special place in my heart because I did a lot with it in my college days. So basically, the event sponsors a bunch of different projects on platforms like Zuniverse and Notes from Nature, and they range from everything to fossil collections, herbarium collections, and both universities can participate and museums are welcome to register and be a part of iDigBio as a featured project. And they come together during the date of the event to promote their collections. There's like a big social media push for them to get people involved and let them know what's going on. And we want to encourage volunteers to come during those days. A lot of times there'll be like promotional events, promotional opportunities. For instance, when I was in college, I did iDigBio in October, like a few years ago. And it was my college institution's herbarium was featured on the platform as one of the projects you could do. I think it was like We Dig Florida Plants was like the name of the project. And basically it was extra credit for one of my classes to go to the computer lab that night. And we were split up into teams. And the goal was to digitize as many plant specimens as possible. And there were like stickers and there were t-shirts you could win. There was hats you could get. And it was really fun. And it kind of got me really interested in citizen science. I didn't really know how to get involved before this event. So I hold a special place in my heart because I won a sticker and I still have it on my laptop. And it's just kind of a great way for you to get experience as to what citizen science is and to prove that anybody can do it. And it's very easy. So normally the event is held in October and institutions will open up their doors and sometimes they'll have setups that people can actually come to the institutions and participate on site. But of course, with the pandemic, that wasn't possible. So it moved to all digital format this past year. And with the move to digital, they actually decided to host a iDigBio Lite event last April that went really well. So they're doing it again this year on April 8th through 11th, and our project will be featured in the iDigBio Lite this year. And basically what that means is that during the April 8th through 11th, Natalie and I are going to be very active in the talk boards of our project. We'll be there to answer questions, and we'll try to promote some fun things about cards we're finding. So basically, if you get involved with our project during the event, you'll be sure to be able to reach out to us and learn some fun things about the project along the way. Back to Natalie for this one.
Thanks, Jordan. And it's also important to note that we are really hoping that this upcoming iDigBio event will get us through the next push for transcribing our index cards. So as you can see here in the next steps, the first thing on the list is to continue transcribing our index card collection. You know, in many ways, the pandemic presented a lot of challenges for our organization, among many others, and of course on an individual level. But one of those being that we could not have volunteers in person helping us to scan card images. We started off that way, having a really strong core team of volunteers helping us scan the images. Jordan joined us in January of 2020, and then by March, our offices were closed. So she has been the one responsible for scanning all of these images to date. And with this push toward remote volunteer activities, we've actually gotten to almost 75% completion for these index cards. So we're really hoping that these next iDigBio events help us get across the finish line so that we can continue and finish transcribing this particular collection. Our goal, once we get all of those transcriptions, is to publish that transcribed data to the Environmental Data Initiative platform. Like I mentioned previously, this is a free platform. Anyone can access it, even if you're just curious to see what's housed there. But because it's not these index cards are not a specimen, we can't publish them through iDigBio or the Consortium of Northeastern Herbaria. Those are really for museum specimens, not necessarily the cards. Our cards are super unique. They don't really fit in any one particular category. But thankfully, with the help of EDI, we've been able to find a place to publish them once those data are fully transcribed. And then once we get past that, we're going to continue imaging herbarium specimens with the help of our local partners, the Environmental Monitoring and Management Alliance. We anticipate having a couple of students join us over the summer to help image these specimens and to publish these images and label data to that Consortium of Northeastern Herbaria portal so that we can contribute to that New England Vascular Plant Project. And then even beyond that, we would really like to digitize our other collections. So I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but we have a few hundred mammal and bird specimens that need to be digitized. We have hundreds of insect specimens and a variety of other types of things that we would really love to get a digital record for, but that are going to be a little bit more challenging. The benefit of starting with the index cards and the herbarium specimens is that they're flat, they're 2D. It's really easy to take an image or to scan a picture. With things like this bat here or this butterfly, that 3D component makes it a little bit more challenging. So we're excited to take what we've learned from this project and translate it to those down the line. And really, we want to just keep spreading the word. We want to keep telling everyone about all of our awesome data. We would love it if you shared it with anyone that you know who might be interested in what we have to offer. And it's a project that we can kind of keep going for, a long time. But the beauty of it is that our collections are manageable for our size. So there is definitely an end in sight. And once we get through all of the collections that we have, we plan to digitize anything that comes in as we go along. So we'll have those protocols in place as we go. And then before we get to our segment with questions, I would love it for Jordan to tell you a little bit more specifically about our Zuniverse project and how you can get involved in what that platform has to offer you.
Yes, I have been very deep into this project since we launched in July. So I just kind of wanted to break it down for you guys, what it will look like if you go to the link at the bottom. And also just to let you guys know, don't worry about trying to write this link down really quick. We do have a document shared with you guys that lists all of the links to location, organizations, and projects that we're talking about today. And this is one of them. So don't try to stress about writing this down. But basically what you're seeing on this slide is what it would look like when you click that link, essentially. This is our project homepage. It's not shown, but just a little bit below where it's cut off is a progress bar that shows how far we are to completion, how many volunteers have been involved. So since we launched in July, we've actually had over 2,000 people get involved, which blew us away. And we're currently sitting at around 70% complete. So like Natalie said, we're hoping that this iDigBio Lite can help push us across that finish line. But I'm going to kind of break down some of the tabs you might be seeing. So under the About a tab, you're going to find information about us, the researchers, and the project itself. And some like FAQs are also in there as well, frequently asked questions. And I try to update regularly if things come up. And the classify button, that is actually where you would click to start doing transcription of the cards themselves. And when you click classify, it'll take you right into a tutorial that we've set up. And if you still have questions after the tutorial, there's also a need help button on every step of the way with more information. So we've tried to answer as many questions as possible for you guys already. But if questions come up, you do not have to worry about asking us because we have the handy talk feature as well. So in the talk boards, you can connect with me and Natalie and ask us questions. We try to check it pretty regularly and keep it up to date and make sure everyone's getting the help they need. But also that's where we're going to find our announcement boards where Natalie and I will post updates about things like iDigBio. We also will let you guys know if there's anything happening with the project. And there's also a technical support board in there. So that's definitely the place to go if you have any questions or concerns. I try to check it at least like once a day in the mornings to make sure that everything's taken care of. Now, if you're in the project, like if you're in the classify tab and you've gone through the tutorial, you're doing cards and you have some questions, there's also a field guide built in. We don't have a picture of it, but you'll see a tab called field guide, and that's very handy. So in there, you're going to find information about the cards. You're also going to find a location list that lists all of the locations you might be seeing in the cards, because one of our questions is we ask you to let us know if a location is mentioned in the observations, and they can be a little confusing because Dan loved to use abbreviations or references to things that if you don't know the preserve super well, it can be kind of hard to pinpoint what he's talking about. So we have a handy dandy list linked in there that lists all the common things you might be coming across for the location field. And there's also a really great letter in there that Paul Huth wrote, I think a few months ago now, where he kind of talked about his experiences with Dan and with the cards and kind of what this collection, what this project means to him. And it's a really great read. So whether or not you end up doing participating in the project, I would definitely recommend checking out that letter from Paul Huth because it's a great read and it really kind of shines a new light on the project. So basically the key parts to remember are the classify button and the talk button. And like I said, we'll be in the talk boards pretty regularly, and especially during the iDigBio Lite event at the end of this week, we're going to be checking it every day, making sure that everyone is getting the help they need and promoting some fun stuff about the collection as well. And with that.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Jordan. Did a great job going over that project. Jordan's done an immense amount of work getting that project up and running through a really challenging year. So love for everyone to give her a nice virtual round of applause for all the hard work she's been doing. I just want to also note that if you do want to get involved with that particular project, you will need to sign up with Zuniverse and create a login. It's super simple. But I also ask that if you are one of our volunteers with Mohonk Preserve, that you also reach out to Andy Reynolds to ask how you can log your hours for this particular project. As you can imagine, this has been a very different project to administer. So we don't have the same tracking mechanisms that we normally have with some of our on-land volunteer initiatives. And we still need those records to basically tell IMLS how we've been doing with project progression. So if you do get involved, please sign up with Zuniverse and also sign up with Andy. That would be amazingly helpful. And now we're right at the time where I was going to leave it open for anyone to ask questions. So feel free to ask us anything about preserve history. We'll do the best we can with that. But in general, what we are doing at the Conservation Science Department, what we're doing with this project, and how you can get involved. Now's the opportunity to ask. And as Jordan mentioned, we do have a resource with all of the relevant links to the organizations and those data portals that we mentioned throughout the presentation. And those will be available to you when Lauren sends you the recording information. So don't worry about writing anything down with regard to links, because we're going to be sending them your way.
Yes, so the file is uploaded, and as far as I can tell, I believe our audience can actually download it right from there. So they'll have it. For those people that have registered and they just couldn't make it this evening, I will provide it in an email link. So when they watch this webinar, they'll be able to have access to that file too. So I'll make sure that everyone who's registered gets that. Soon. Soon as I can do that. Yeah. Oh, let's see. We do have a question here. Barbara, she says, if you are signed up to record volunteer hours, can you just input the hours for transcribing the cards?
Of course. Yeah, so just touch base with Andy so that you're recording the hours under the project that he has it kind of tabbed within in Volgistics. I think it's digitization volunteers, but you'll want to just double check with him. But yeah, essentially you would just input the hours that you spent transcribing the cards. You would also input any hours that you spend training. So reading through those field guides and the tutorials, just kind of learning about the Zuniverse platform and how it works. Any and all of that sort of time, it also contributes to your volunteer hours. So yes, Barbara.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad that you said to include the time it takes you to figure out how to use the platform and what that's all about. That's still, you're still volunteering your time. You're still learning how to use this platform. Yeah, I've done a couple of cards myself. I'm one of the thousands of people that have helped out.
All right.
It's kind of addicting. So if you haven't done it yet, you might find yourself, you're like, I'm only going to do like 10, 15 minutes, right? And then like 45 minutes to like an hour later, you're like, whoa, I've done this for a bit now. Yeah, it's a little addicting and it's quite satisfying too. And there's a lot of great information that's on these cards. And you are right, there are a lot of like little shorthand abbreviation for some places on there. So some cards are straightforward, really short. Some of them are front and back. So you have to look at a couple of, like, I guess front and back because it's not physical, but you know what I mean. You have to see both sides. So it is addicting, and it is really fun to look at this information from a century ago, right? Basically,
Yeah.
a century ago, we have all these records. So, and I have had a chance to talk with some teachers across the state who actually know about us, and they actually said, I did some of the cards. So we have a far-reaching audience here. They said also very addicting. So
that's great.
Get involved.
Oh, and a little tip from someone who's digitized probably thousands of herbarium specimens at this point. Don't be thrown off by the handwriting, because the more time you spend with the cards, the more you'll become used to it. So once you kind of get over Dan or Paul's handwriting styles, it'll be a breeze. So don't let that worry you from the get-go. You'll get used to it, and then it'll just be like reading anything else.
Yeah, and something else I want to throw out there that I didn't mention is if you come across cards as you're going through that like are kind of funny or entertaining or interesting, please like let us know. I actually am making a collection of the interesting cards in the collection for us to like have in case we want to promote anything. Some people have pointed out some really fun things about like a squirrel going a little crazy, or like a card where Dan described him squeaking like a mouse, hearing an owl hooting out of his window, and it's I love them. So if you come across anything that like makes you smile or makes you chuckle, please let me know, because I'm trying to collect as many of those kind of cards as I can.
That is a good point, Jordan. And you also bring up another good point in that in some instances, Dan had a very narrative style of recording his natural history observations. So when he describes the first instance of the porcupine he saw on the ridge, it's this nice little paragraph about how his brother Kai was walking along and this porcupine came walking by and so on and so forth. But part of the power of transcribing these index card data is that we're taking this story and we're basically translating all of that information into data sets, into tables that can then be processed by all sorts of statistical software. So we're taking these really cool stories, but we're also making sure that they're useful in terms of scientific analysis. So lots of really interesting ways these cards can be used. But enough for me. What questions do you guys have?
We've got a thank you from Barbara for answering her question. So we've got that. She's right. It is a very interesting topic. And even just looking at those, thinking about those note cards and things and the way that some of them are very storytelling, conversational, it's might be inspiring for some people looking at these cards to maybe start doing their own little phenology, natural history observations, what's going on in their backyard, and starting to document those things. Being a great little phenologist.
Be the next Dan Smiley, you know?
Yeah,
who knows?
be the next Dan Smiley.
And if you're really interested, look into a program called iNaturalist. We're going to be talking more about that toward the end of the month.
That's right. Yeah, at the end of the month there we will have another webinar, and the two of you will be presenting again on iNaturalist. Also a very awesome citizen science project, because April is Global Citizen Science Month. So we're focusing on that. Well, I don't see too many other questions here. So
okay.
I think that we've just had a great presentation. This was really wonderful. There are a few things that I didn't know about all of this. So every time I do one of these webinars, I do learn something new. And you two definitely, you did a great job. Thank you so much for...
one question just...
Oh, there's another one.
Yes.
Oh, if we find an interesting or funny card, how do we identify the card to you? Ooh, good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. So basically, when you're in the process of digitizing a card, that's a hard word to say, I keep lasting it up. But when you're in the process of transcribing the card, there'll be a button you can click to send it to the talk boards with a question. You'll see it, it'll say like questions. And then you can just type up, well, actually Zuniverse uses hashtags. So people will hashtag interesting card, or hashtag, also if they have concerns, you can hashtag text missing or clipped by scan or something like that. So just hashtag it interesting card and it will pop up for me. And I'll see it and I'll save it to our collection of interesting things.
Yes, and if you have any other questions that pop up after this webinar, or if you're someone who's watching at a later date with the recording, our emails are here on this page. Feel free to reach out to us with anything that comes to mind.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Yeah, highly encourage it. You two are going to be available, especially in the next couple of days here at the end of the week for the big iDigBio. So yeah, the whole thing, you're going to be available for all of that. And of course, yeah, thank you for including your emails. And I know that you were happy to answer any other questions that may come later on. And as we said, this is being recorded, and I will get that recording up and send it out to everyone as soon as I can, as soon as it's all processed. All right.
Alrighty. Thank you, and have a good night, everybody. We hope to see you on our Notes from Nature project.
Yes, and iNaturalist later on this month.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Be there, be square, right? Bye, guys.